London in the late 18th century was suffocating under its own progress. A labyrinth of brick and soot consumed the lives of the vulnerable. In 1789, William Blake published an illuminated collection of poetry titled Songs of Innocence. The plates depicted vibrant, pastoral scenes of children gathered safely. But this idyllic framing is an intentional misdirection. Hidden within these pastoral pages is a sharp, devastating critique of Georgian society. The poem The Chimney Sweeper documents the lives of climbing boys, impoverished children sold into labor to clear the city's toxic flues. To deliver this sharp critique, Blake employs a deceptive architecture. He constructs the text to mimic the cadence of a simple children's nursery rhyme. Look at this animated diagram of the first stanza. The strict AABB structure forces the reader into a bouncy, upbeat rhythm, mirroring the sing-song quality of a playground chant. Blake weaponizes this naive, unfiltered perspective to force the reader into the gap between what the child believes and what the history reveals. We are going to execute a rigorous, line-by-line deduction of the text to see exactly how the daily horrors of industrial labor shaped this deceptively cheerful poem. The entire piece operates as a psychological trap. The happier the child sounds, the darker the reality we are meant to perceive. Here is the first stanza. The poem opens with a blunt origin story. When my mother died, I was very young, and my father sold me. This image illustrates the reality of the climbing boy. In the 18th century, impoverished fathers legally sold their young sons to master sweepers to take on the crushing physical burden of navigating chimneys. Now look at lines 3 and 4. The child cries out, "Weep, weep, weep, weep," as he walks the streets seeking work. This is a phonetic capture of the era's street cries. The child is so young he cannot even form the S sound in the word sweep. The stanza ends with a visceral statement of condition. In soot I sleep. The dirt of his labor is inescapable. The narrator is entirely commodified. His literal call for daily labor is phonetically indistinguishable from a cry of pure distress. Moving to the second stanza, the narrator introduces a new boy, Tom Dacre, who is weeping as his head is shaved. Blake uses a highly specific simile here, noting that Tom's hair curled like a lamb's back. This diagram maps the stanza's language. The lamb represents pure innocence, but also the ultimate sacrificial animal. Notice how Blake places words of purity like white, lamb, and silver directly against encroaching terms of corruption like soot and spoil. The shaving of the boy's head served a harsh practical purpose. It prevented their hair from catching fire in the narrow flues and stopped the rapid spread of lice in their cramped sleeping quarters. The narrator's response to Tom's tears is to tell him to hush and to rationalize the trauma. He tells Tom that with a shaved head, the soot cannot spoil his beautiful white hair. This rationalization exposes a deep layer of tragedy in the poem. The children must actively participate in erasing their own identities just to psychologically survive the job. In the third stanza, the scope of the poem widens. The narrator lists off his peers, Dick, Joe, Ned, and Jack. These are highly generic, working-class names. Blake uses them to show that this is not an isolated incident, but a mass systemic crisis affecting thousands of children. The stanza ends with a vision that they are all locked up in coffins of black. To understand the coffins metaphor, examine 18th century architecture. Flues heating these multi-story houses were terrifyingly small, sometimes just 14 inches across, featuring rigid 90-degree angles where bodies became wedged. Mortality was staggering. They faced suffocation, positional asphyxia, burning, and lethal chimney sweeps cancer. This brings us to the fourth stanza, where Tom's dream introduces an angel who arrives to open the coffins. The angel wields a bright key. It is a direct manifestation of the boy's desperate need for divine intervention, conjured because human society has entirely abandoned them. This dream functions as a fatalistic coping mechanism, generated by a mind seeking escape from a literal death chamber. Stanza 5 completely shatters the dark claustrophobia of the flues, replacing it with sudden, expansive natural imagery. The text explodes with active, joyous verbs. The The boys are leaping, laughing, washing in a river, and shining in the sun. The stanza specifies that they leave their bags behind. This represents the physical shedding of their tools and the weight of their exploited labor. Blake describes them rising naked and white. It is a complete reversion to uncorrupted pre-industrial innocence. Notice what the children are dreaming about. Their ultimate fantasy isn't immense wealth or power. It is merely the right to be clean and the right to play, fundamental rights violently denied to them. Then, the sixth and final stanza delivers an abrupt, jarring transition. The dream snaps shut, and Tom wakes up in the freezing dark to gather his brushes. We need to look closely at the angel's promise from the dream. If Tom is a good boy, he will have God for his father. This reflects the era's weaponization of faith. Religious indoctrination was systematically used to keep the lower classes, and particularly child laborers, obedient and subservient to the masters who exploited them. Blake gives us a heartbreaking detail here. Tom marches into the freezing morning happy and warm. He is entirely insulated from his grim reality by his own delusion. And then Blake delivers the final famous line, "So if all do their duty, they need not fear harm." This is the terrifying climax of the poem's dramatic irony. As readers, we know what the children do not. Doing their duty in the chimneys is the exact mechanism that guarantees their physical harm and eventual death. The bouncy, rhythmic structure tricks the casual reader into accepting this final couplet as a happy, moral ending. But looking at the historical reality, that ending is a death sentence. Blake moves beyond a simple portrait of suffering children. He captures the exact moment a corrupt society teaches the exploited to smile as they march toward their own graves.